From the earliest memories I have, I believed in God. As soon as I was old enough to grasp the world around me, I was taught that faith was the cornerstone of everything. My mother often reminded me, "Without God, we are nothing. Never forget that." Her words stayed with me as I grew, and by the time I reached my teenage years, I was certain of my path. Serving Him wasn't just something I chose, it felt like destiny. Becoming a priest wasn't merely a decision, it was a calling. At least that's what I told myself. I dedicated years to studying in the seminary, immersing myself in scripture, theology, and church teachings. I committed prayers to memory, performed sacred rites, and learned the deep responsibility of guiding a congregation. When I was finally ordained, it felt as if everything had aligned perfectly. I had a purpose, a mission. For years, I served in a small town in Mexico, a place where faith was an inseparable part of daily life. The people placed their trust in me, seeking counsel, comfort, and spiritual direction. I baptized their children, officiated their weddings, and blessed their homes. Outwardly, I was everything a priest was meant to be. Yet, beneath the surface, something always felt off. I never voiced it to anyone. How could I? A priest is meant to be steadfast, unwavering in his faith. But in those quiet moments, when the church stood empty and candlelight flickered against the ancient stone walls, I felt it. Doubt. I prayed daily, led Mass with devotion, and upheld the sacred traditions passed down through generations. Still, I couldn't shake the question that lingered in my heart. Did I truly know God, or was I simply fulfilling a role? Was I genuinely guiding others to Him, or was I merely sustaining an institution? I told myself these were fleeting moments of weakness, yet they never truly disappeared. And then, one night, everything shifted. It began like any other evening. The town had settled into stillness. Families gathered in their homes. I had just finished my final prayers of the day and sat alone in the dimly lit church. The only sounds were the faint chirping of crickets outside and the soft murmur of the wind slipping through the cracks in the old wooden doors. My gaze lifted to the large crucifix above the altar, my eyes locking onto the figure of Christ on the cross. What am I missing, I wondered. Why do I feel so distant from you? Closing my eyes, I whispered a quiet plea, for clarity, for direction, for anything to fill the growing void inside me. Then it happened. At first, it was subtle, a faint pressure in my chest, nothing alarming, just enough to make me shift uncomfortably. I adjusted my posture, assuming I had simply been sitting too long. But the sensation intensified, spreading like fire through my ribs. A sharp breath escaped my lips as I instinctively clutched my chest. Chest pains surged through me, radiating down my arm like a bolt of fire. In an instant, every ounce of strength drained from my body. My vision blurred, the candlelight smearing into warped, ghostly trails. I tried to rise from the pew, but my legs refused to respond. My breath came in shallow, uneven gasps, my head spinning as the world around me tilted dangerously. A deafening pounding filled my ears, my own heartbeat drowning out every other sound. I was dying. The realization struck me like a blow. My body was shutting down, right here, in the very place where I had devoted my life to service, alone. No one to call for help. Desperately, I reached out, my fingertips grazing the altar as if clinging to it might somehow tether me to this world. But my strength was slipping fast. My knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the unforgiving tile floor. My head hit the cold surface, but the impact barely registered. All I could feel was the crushing weight in my chest, the searing pain in my lungs as I fought for air. I wanted to speak, to cry out, to pray, to call for someone, but no words came. The edges of my vision darkened, my thoughts slowing. fading, dissolving into silence. And then, nothing. No pain. No sound. Just an empty, weightless void. I drifted there, untethered, lost in an endless expanse of nothingness. Time lost all meaning. Seconds, minutes, hours, it didn't matter. Then, something changed. A sensation, foreign yet oddly familiar, swept over me. It wasn't physical, yet I felt as though I were being lifted, drawn upward by an unseen force. I became aware of the room again, but from a perspective I had never experienced before. That's when I saw it, my own body, motionless on the cold tile floor. Limbs limp, face pale, a fragile shell, empty and still. I wasn't in it anymore. In that moment I knew. I was dead. My face, pale as a ghost, stared back at me. A small smear of blood marked the floor where my head had struck, a chilling reminder of what had just happened. It was surreal. There I was, looking at myself, yet fear never came. Shouldn't I have been terrified? Shouldn't panic have set in? But instead, an eerie sense of peace wrapped around me, as if all the noise and turmoil of the world had been left far behind. I drifted there, weightless, unable to move forward or back, merely observing the scene below. The church itself felt unfamiliar, though I had prayed, preached, and devoted countless years to it. It wasn't just the strange vantage point, it was something deeper, an unsettling shift in its very essence. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. A shadow, lurking just beyond the reach of the candlelight, weaving between the pews. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the flickering flames. But as it crept closer, I realized it was no illusion. And worse, it wasn't alone. More of them emerged, seeping from the darkness like living smoke, shifting and coiling in unnatural ways. They had no discernible features, no faces I could recognize, but I felt them. The air grew heavier, colder, as if an unseen force was pressing down on me. My earlier calm shattered, replaced by an overwhelming sense of dread. The shadows didn't speak, not with words, but I could hear them. A chorus of whispers, faint and chilling, like the wind carrying secrets I wasn't meant to understand. Their meaning was unclear, but their intent was unmistakable. They were reaching for me. I felt it. A force, unseen but undeniable, pulling at the core of my being, dragging me away from the light of the altar and into the abyss beyond. I struggled, fought against it, but it was like trying to swim against a riptide. Every effort only made the pull stronger. My thoughts raced, panic clawing at me as realization set in. I was powerless to stop them. Was this it? Was this where I was meant to go? I thought of all the sermons I had given, all the warnings I had preached about the unseen battles of the spirit. But I had never truly grasped the weight of those words, until now. These shadows were more than mere darkness. They were alive, and they wanted me. I tried to scream, to call for help, but I had no voice, no body, only helpless awareness as the shadows swarmed closer. Their whispers morphed into a deep, menacing hum, vibrating through me like a death knell. Then, just as the darkness threatened to consume me, something changed. A light, small at first, a distant flicker, like a single ember in an ocean of black. But it grew, swelling in strength, slicing through the shadows like a blade. They recoiled, writhing and retreating as the radiance expanded. The crushing weight vanished in an instant. The darkness had no hold on me anymore. The moment I was engulfed by the light, it wasn't just around me. It was within me, filling every fiber of my existence. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but brilliant, pure, and immensely powerful, yet somehow tender, as if it were wrapping itself around me. My eyes couldn't stray from it. My thoughts couldn't focus on anything else. I felt it pulling me in, and for the first time, I didn't resist. As I drifted forward, The murmurs of darkness faded into absolute silence, a silence that felt almost melodic, resonating with a deep serenity, yet carrying an undercurrent of expectation, as if something extraordinary awaited just beyond my reach. The closer I drew, the stronger the presence within the light became. This wasn't just illumination for its own sake. It was alive, overflowing with love and immeasurable power, and it was calling to me. For the first time since I had left my body, I didn't feel adrift. There was no fear, no uncertainty, only the undeniable pull towards something far greater than myself. In that instant, I understood this was no mere vision, no fleeting dream. I was being drawn towards something divine, something that would forever change me. The light enveloped me, flooding my soul with peace, unlike anything I had ever known. As I moved deeper into its embrace, awareness dawned upon me, an awareness of a presence so overwhelming, so vast, that I instinctively knew I was approaching something beyond human comprehension. And then I saw him. At the very core of the radiance stood a figure, distinct yet inseparable from the light itself, as though he was both its source and its essence. His form was clear, yet carried an otherworldly depth beyond what my eyes could fully perceive. His face radiated boundless love and compassion, yet within his presence was an authority so absolute that everything else seemed to fade into insignificance. I stopped, or at least if movement had meaning in this place, I ceased moving. I simply stood, or existed, in awe. Then he spoke. Javier. The way he spoke my name was unlike anything I had ever known. It wasn't just a sound. It was a summoning, a recognition that reached deep into the very core of my soul. Javier, he said again, and this time I felt the weight of it. Not in judgment, not in anger, just pure, unshakable truth. I couldn't respond. What words could possibly suffice? My entire life had been dedicated to speaking of him, teaching his words, urging others to follow him. And yet in this moment, standing before him, I felt utterly unprepared. He stepped closer, and the love that radiated from him was almost too much to bear. It wasn't a love I had earned, nor one I could ever deserve. It simply was, overpowering, relentless, unconditional. You have served me, he said, his voice steady and filled with both gentleness and strength. You have given your life to my work. But, Javier, do you truly know me? The question struck like thunder, reverberating through me. My mind raced, searching for an answer. Of course I knew. I had spent years immersed in scripture, leading mass, and teaching others about Christ's sacrifice. I thought I understood him. But as I stood before Jesus, an unsettling realization gripped me. I didn't truly know him. I thought I did, I managed to say, though my voice was thin and uncertain. His expression held both sorrow and hope, as if he had long known this truth, but was waiting for me to grasp it myself. You know of me, he said gently, yet his words pierced straight to my soul. You know the stories, the traditions, the prayers, but have you ever truly known me? Have you sought my heart, or have you only followed my commands? His words struck deep, cutting through everything I had built my life upon. My faith had been measured by my devotion to rituals, my adherence to religious order, my ability to follow the rules. But had I ever genuinely pursued a relationship with him? Had I ever sought to know him beyond the scriptures I preached? A heavy weight settled over me as I thought back to all the sermons I had delivered, all the guidance I had given to others, urging them to trust in Jesus, when in truth I had been too afraid to do so myself. My voice trembled as I whispered, I don't know. I thought I was doing what you wanted. I thought I was serving you. Jesus placed a hand on my shoulder, and the warmth of his touch brought both comfort and conviction. "You have done much, Javier," he said, his voice filled with kindness. "But faith is not just about actions. It is about being with me. It is about knowing me, loving me, and allowing that love to shape everything you do." Tears blurred my vision as the truth overwhelmed me. I had spent my life believing that obedience and duty were enough. But now, in his presence, I saw what I had been missing all along. My voice broke as I fell to my knees. "I'm sorry," I choked out. "I thought I was enough. I thought my efforts were enough. But I see now. I was missing the most important thing." Jesus knelt beside me, his gaze filled only with love. "It is not too late, Javier," he assured me. "You can still know me. You can still walk with me, not just work for me." His words pulled me from the darkness of my despair, and for the first time, I understood. Faith wasn't about position, structure, or routine. It was about him. Lifting my tear-streaked face, I met his eyes. "Teach me," I said. "Teach me how to know you." Jesus smiled, and in that moment, the light around us seemed to shine even brighter. "This is only the beginning, Javier," he said, his voice steady yet filled with promise. "There is so much more to understand." At that moment, everything around me began to shift once more, and I felt myself being pulled deeper into his presence. The light surrounding me changed. It became richer, layered with meanings beyond my comprehension. Jesus stood before me, unwavering, his gaze filled with purpose. I could sense that he was about to reveal something profound, something that would alter me forever. "Javier," he spoke again, his tone both tender and resolute, "you have devoted your life to serving me, but there is a greater truth you must recognize." Before I could respond, the light transformed again. Suddenly, I was no longer standing in its warmth, but watching scenes from my own life unfold, as if peering through a window. These were not merely memories. They were pivotal moments in my ministry, instances where I believed I was fulfilling God's work. Yet now, seeing them through his eyes, I noticed things I had been blind to before. One vision showed me blessing a family's home. The mother clutched her infant tightly, her eyes brimming with gratitude, as I sprinkled holy water and spoke prayers over them. At the time, I had felt a sense of duty fulfilled, believing I had brought God's presence into their household. But now, watching the moment replay, I saw what I had missed. I had rushed through the blessing, preoccupied with the next obligation on my schedule. I hadn't paused to truly listen to them, to understand their fears or hopes. I had performed the ceremony, but I hadn't been truly present. The scene shifted again. I was delivering a sermon to a packed congregation, passionately preaching about faith and obedience. It was a message I had given many times, convinced that my words were inspiring those before me. But now, seeing it from this new perspective, I noticed faces in the crowd I had overlooked before, faces marked with doubt, sorrow, and yearning. They weren't looking for doctrine or ritual. They were searching for something deeper, something real. And I had not seen them. I had not met them in their need. Tears welled in my eyes as more moments from my past unfolded. Time after time, I had focused on tradition, on the outward expressions of faith, while failing to see the deeper spiritual hunger of the people I was meant to guide. It wasn't that the rituals were wrong. They held significance. But I had allowed them to take precedence over the true essence of my ministry. I had placed them at the center instead of placing Jesus there. Do you understand now, Javier? Jesus' voice pierced through the weight of my realization. Faith is not about the rituals you perform, but about the love you embody. The weight of his words struck me so deeply that I could only nod, unable to find my voice. Everything he said was undeniable, and it pierced through me. For so long, I had believed that being a faithful priest meant strictly adhering to the rules, leading ceremonies, and upholding the church's traditions. But now, I realized how limited my understanding had been. Jesus continued, "The church is not an institution, Javier. It is my body. It is the people who seek me, who love me, and who love one another. It is not built with stone or wood, but with hearts that are open to my grace." As he spoke, the vision around me shifted again. This time, I saw glimpses of moments when I had truly embodied his love without even recognizing it. I saw myself sitting beside an elderly woman who had just lost her husband, holding her hand as she wept. I saw myself offering the last rites to a dying young man in a hospital, his grieving family gathered around him. I saw myself helping a poor farmer repair his roof after a storm, my hands raw and aching from the work. "These were the moments when you truly knew me," Jesus said gently. "Not because of what you were doing, but because of the love behind it. In these moments, your heart was aligned with mine." A wave of emotion washed over me, awe at the power of love to illuminate even the darkest times, but also shame at how often I had failed to let that love guide me completely. For every instance of true connection, there were so many others where I had allowed duty to overshadow compassion, where I had placed rituals above the true purpose of my calling. Jesus stepped closer, his gaze filled with kindness. "Javier, I do not condemn you. I know your heart and I see the weight you have carried. But now that you know the truth, you must make a choice." "A choice?" I whispered, my voice unsteady. He nodded. "You can continue as you have, doing good, but never fully knowing me. Or you can release the traditions that have held you back and step into the fullness of my love. You can lead others to me not through rituals, but by living a life that reflects my grace." His words settled over me like a heavy yet freeing truth. There was no going back. I could not unsee what I had seen, nor could I unknow what had been revealed to me. I had always believed my role as a priest was to preserve the church. But now, I understood it was about something much greater, guiding people to Jesus, helping them know him as I was only just beginning to. With my voice shaking from the weight of it all, I finally spoke. "I choose you," I said, emotion thick in my throat. "I want to truly know you, to live for you." Jesus smiled, and the light around him seemed to shine even brighter. "Then follow me, Javier," he said, "and trust. The path ahead would not be mine to walk alone." With every word he spoke, a warmth spread through my chest, filling me with a peace I had never known. The fears, the uncertainties, and the endless doubts that had haunted me for so long began to lose their grip. They weren't gone entirely, but they no longer held power over me. This was the start of something new, something real. The light surrounding us shifted once more, and I knew my journey was far from over. There was still more to witness, more to comprehend. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. As the radiance settled, I remained standing, overwhelmed by everything I had just experienced. The weight of my choices, my faith, and my uncertainties pressed against me. Yet beneath it all, there was an unshakable clarity. For the first time, I recognized what had been missing, and my heart longed to hold on to this truth forever. Jesus stepped closer, his eyes filled with both compassion and conviction. I sensed that something profound was about to unfold, something that would completely alter the course of my life. "Javier," he said, his voice both steady and kind. "What you have seen is not meant for you alone. It is for them, for those who are searching, for those who feel lost, and for those who have placed their trust in things that cannot satisfy." I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. My thoughts raced. How could I, someone who had spent years clinging to rituals and traditions, possibly lead others towards something deeper? How could I ever live up to the truth he had revealed to me? Jesus seemed to hear the questions before I could even speak them. "You are not called to be flawless," he said. "You are called to be faithful. It is not your strength that will sustain this mission. It is mine." He lifted his hand, and in an instant, the light around us shifted once more. Suddenly, I was no longer in that place of peace and radiance. Instead, I was seeing the world, our world, from above. It wasn't a vision of landscapes or cities, but of hearts, lives, and souls. I saw people everywhere, moving through their days with quiet sorrow etched into their faces. Some bore the weight of poverty, others the pain of loneliness or loss. Many lived in material comfort, yet carried an emptiness within them. Their circumstances differed, but at their core, they all longed for something real, something beyond what they had known. Then I saw churches, some bustling with activity, others nearly empty. In many of them, I could see the focus on rituals, the carefully spoken prayers, the hymns sung, the traditions upheld. Yet there was something missing, something vital. It was like a shell, outwardly beautiful, but lacking the life that made it whole. And then I noticed something else, glimmers of true faith, shining like tiny sparks in the vast darkness. A mother whispering a prayer over her child. A young man choosing forgiveness when anger would have been easier. A stranger offering kindness to someone in need. These moments were quiet, almost invisible to the world, yet they carried immense power. They embodied everything Jesus had been teaching me. Faith wasn't about grand gestures or strict rituals. It was about love, humility, and connection. As the vision unfolded, a deep sadness welled up inside me for those who had become lost in tradition, people who believed that following rules was enough, but had never truly experienced the love of Jesus. Only now did I fully grasp what he meant when he said it wasn't too late. These people weren't beyond hope. They simply needed someone to guide them. "Do you see, Javier?" Jesus spoke, his voice cutting through the vision. "This is the world I came to save, and this is the world I am calling you to serve." Tears blurred my vision as I turned to him. "But how?" I asked, my voice unsteady. "How can I reach them? How can I help them see what I've seen?" Jesus smiled, his expression both firm and gentle. "By living the truth you now understand," he said. "By showing them my love, not just speaking of it. By walking beside them, not above them. And by reminding them that their worth isn't in their actions, but in who they are in me." His words settled deep within me, planting themselves in my heart like seeds in fertile soil. I didn't know exactly how I would carry out this mission, but I knew one thing. I couldn't turn away from it. The world needed this truth, and I had been chosen to share it. Before I could respond, Jesus lifted his hand, and the light surrounding us grew even brighter. As he placed his palm over my heart, warmth spread through me, washing over me like a wave of energy and peace. "Javier," he said, his voice carrying both authority and tenderness, "you are not alone. I will be with you in every step, every word, every moment. Trust me, and I will lead you." The instant his hand touched my chest, something shifted inside me. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing my purpose with a clarity I had never known before. The doubts and fears that had once held me back were still there, but they no longer controlled me. They were overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of love, hope, and determination. The light around us began to change once more, and I understood what was happening. My time here was drawing to a close. Soon, I would return to my body. My life and the mission Jesus had entrusted to me remained at the forefront of my mind as the light around me slowly dimmed. Then, in a voice filled with unwavering love, Jesus spoke once more. "Javier, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know, and I have always known you. With those final words, the brilliance faded, and I felt myself being gently pulled back, as though I was slowly descending into the world I had left behind. Yet even as I returned, the peace of his presence lingered within me. I became aware of the weight of my body again, the heaviness settling in my chest, but my spirit had been forever changed. I had been given a mission, and failure was not an option. The first thing I noticed as I came back was the sound of voices, soft at first, distant and unclear, as if muffled by a thick barrier. Gradually they grew sharper, urgent tones filled with concern. My limbs felt weak, my breath unsteady, but I was alive. Slowly I forced my eyes open, squinting as the bright fluorescent lights above me came into focus. It took a moment for reality to settle in. I was in a hospital. Machines beeped rhythmically around me, and a cool sensation ran through my arm where an IV had been placed. A nurse leaned over me, her expression softening with relief as she saw me regain consciousness. "Padre," she whispered, "you're awake." The word carried more weight than it should have. I wasn't just conscious. I was truly awake, in a way I had never been before. The memories flooded back in vivid clarity, the radiance, the encounter with Jesus, the purpose he had placed in my hands. It all felt just as real as the hospital room surrounding me. The nurse stepped aside as a doctor entered, speaking quickly about my condition. He mentioned a heart attack, how close they had come to losing me, how it was nothing short of a miracle that I had survived. I nodded absent-mindedly, only half listening. My mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment, every word Jesus had spoken to me. Once the doctor left, I lay there staring at the ceiling, letting the magnitude of it all sink in. I had died. I had stood in his presence, and now I had been given another chance, not just to live, but to live with purpose. The following days blurred together as friends and members of my parish visited, offering prayers and words of encouragement. They called me lucky, blessed to have survived. I smiled, thanking them, but deep down I knew this was not mere luck. This was something far greater. As soon as my strength allowed, I began to share my experience. I spoke with my fellow priests, recounting every detail, what I had seen, what Jesus had revealed to me. I described the light, the vision, and the truth that had been imprinted on my soul. Faith, I realized, was not about titles or rituals, but about truly knowing him. And that truth was something I could never keep to myself. They acknowledged it politely but brushed it off, insisting it was nothing more than a dream. An illusion of my mind, shaped by stress. "These kinds of things happen when people have near-death experiences," one of them remarked, his voice kind but condescending. "Don't dwell on it too much." But I couldn't push it aside. Deep in my soul, I knew what I had experienced was real. Not everyone dismissed it so easily, though. A handful of people, some parishioners, some close friends, listened with rapt attention, their expressions filled with awe. "Padre," a woman whispered, her voice unsteady, "do you believe Jesus is truly calling us to something more?" "Yes," I answered, my tone unwavering. "He calls each of us, not just to follow customs out of habit, but to truly know him, to live with love, humility, and compassion." That conversation marked a turning point in my ministry. When I returned to the church, I knew I couldn't continue as before. It wasn't enough to simply lead Mass, perform rituals, and move through the motions. My heart had changed, and my work needed to reflect that transformation. I began to truly see the people around me, to hear their struggles, to walk alongside them in their faith. I spent more time with the sick, the poor, and the broken, not merely offering prayers, but demonstrating Christ's love through my actions. My sermons changed, too. No longer did I focus on strict adherence to church doctrine as the highest calling. Instead, I spoke of Jesus, the relationship he desires with each of us, the way he longs for us to know him personally. I urged people to seek him not just in tradition, but within their hearts. Some embraced this shift, saying they had never felt closer to God. Others resisted, holding tightly to the customs they had followed all their lives, and that was okay. My role was not to impose change, but to lead with love, to reflect the truth that Jesus had revealed to me. It wasn't always easy. Some days, the doubt and opposition weighed heavily on me. I questioned whether I was truly fulfilling the mission Christ had given me. But in those moments, I clung to the words he had placed in my heart. You are not alone. I will lead you. That promise became my anchor. As the months passed, the transformation within the parish became undeniable. Those who had once felt disconnected from their faith discovered new depth in their relationship with God. Families grew stronger, neighbors became more compassionate, and the church ceased to be just a building. It became a true community. And as for me, I found a peace I had never known before. The doubts that had once plagued me faded, replaced by a quiet certainty in Christ's love. No longer did I define my worth by my role as a priest or by the rituals I performed. I understood now that my worth was in him, and that was enough. One evening, as I sat alone in the dimly lit church, the candlelight flickering around me, I reflected on how much had changed. As I reflected on that night, I recalled the moment I collapsed, the sharp pain, the overwhelming fear, and the suffocating darkness that closed in around me. But more than anything, I remembered the light, an indescribable, radiant light that flooded my soul with his presence. That was when I understood. Faith was never about rituals or titles. It was always about him, about truly knowing and loving him and allowing that love to reshape every part of our lives. Kneeling at the altar, I murmured a quiet prayer, not for myself, but for those I had been entrusted to guide. Lord, help me to reflect the truth you have revealed to me. Help me lead them to you. At that moment, I felt it again, his presence just as real and powerful as it had been that night. A deep certainty settled within me. I was exactly where I was meant to be, fulfilling the purpose I had been called to. The journey was far from over, but I was prepared for whatever lay ahead.